I grew up 2 kilometers from the Haldiram house in Nagpur. My whole life, they were just the family down the road. I didn't think of them as a business, they were neighbors. A few months ago, I read this book called Bhujia Berens by Pavitra Kumar, published in 2016, and I got to the end of it and realized I had been living next to something extraordinary my entire life and I had no idea. So I read it again and then I read it a third time. And on the third read, I wrote down how Haldiram works over and over again, what he did for 60 years and what his sons and grandsons kept doing after him. I found four ideas. My name is Dr. Arpit Gupta. This is Billionaire Best Friend, and today is how Haldiram works. Idea number one is the hard way is the right way. Haldiram believed this at 12 years old. Here's how you know. In 1920, there were maybe a dozen families making bhujia. Every one of them used besan, chickpea flour, as the primary base. The book tells you why. Besan was easier to work with. It gave better consistency. It was easier to fry. Every shopkeeper in Bhujia Bazaar had independently arrived at the same answer. Use besan because besan is easier. Now listen to what 12-year-old Haldiram does. Contrary to his mentor's teachings, Haldiram refused to take the easier way out. He figured that if the bhujia were made from moat, people would simply find it irresistible. So he used moat ki dal. It was harder to fry, but the Rajasthani already craved it, as Haldiram belonged to Bikaner region, which is more or less a desert. Almost nothing grows there, but this lentil moat is plentiful. And Haldiram's decides people already love it. What if I build a bhujia using moat ki dal? Then people would crave it. And so Haldiram used moat ki dal, which was harder to fry, but the Rajasthani already craved it. It was a staple in their region. This reminded me of Michael Ferrero. There's a description of him in his biography. Michael channeled his obsessive energy into inventing entirely new confections. Ferrero proved to be an imaginative product developer with an almost uncanny sense of what treats people craved. This, I think, would perfectly apply to our hero Haldiram. Then, Haldiram did a second hard thing. The existing bhujia was fat and soft. He wanted it thin and crispy. For that, he needed a different mesh. He could not buy one because it literally did not existed. Nobody made one. So he went and found a metal worker in the bazaar. This is what the book says about it. In spite of his busy schedule at the shop, Haldiram found the time to endlessly wander the market to identify the right mesh maker. When found, he spent hours with the mesh maker, overseeing the hammering and puncturing of the thin sheets of steel. And in the midst of all of this, he'd experiment with various ratio of besan and moat and spices over and over again. As a result of this, in 20 days, his hands had as many scabs as a veteran halwai who had been doing this for decades. 12 years old, scars from months of work. And he did such experiments for 60 years till he died. Truly living this idea that I've copied from David Senra. If you love something, the only exit opportunity is death. Now, 1944, he walks out of the family home with nothing. He could have made bhujia the easy way. Cheap besan, no custom tools. He didn't. And he and Champa Devi, his wife, started making moong dal on the street for 6 months until Haldiram could save enough to open a real shop. Every morning from that day forward, he and his wife were at the shop before sunrise at 2 a.m. That's literally at the night, mixing the batter. He blended the spices himself. He opened the shop at 7 so nobody would find it closed. If you want to listen to all these stories in detail, I covered them on the Monday episode. If you listen to the Monday episode first, this episode will hit different because Mondays are about the entire story, and Thursdays, this episode is about how Haldiram works. Coming back to the story, the grandson Manohar Lal remembers Haldiram opening shop at 7 a.m. this way. In the winters at 7 a.m., it was still dark. The entire marketplace remained shut until at least 9 a.m. However, Dadaji would insist on getting to the shop and sitting there with only a lonely lamp to give him company, shivering in the cold, knowing fully well that he would not see a single customer for at least another couple of hours. Shivering in the cold with only a lamp, 2 hours before any customer for decades. That's the way Haldiram worked. This is the same principle as the moat and the mesh. The hard way is the right way. And the grandsons learned it. Shiv Kishan in Kolkata in the 1960s, the Bengalis had a snack called Bengali mixture. It was light, crispy, and popular. Shiv Kishan reverse engineered the Bengali mixture. Instead of importing Bikaneri bhujia, he bought samples, took them apart, tasted them, and figured out the spice ratios, made a better version instead of doing the easy thing, which was to just import Bikaneri bhujia and sell it. Listen to him decades later at 75 describing this. I know the individual tastes of every spice from cumin, cinnamon, pepper to cardamom and fennel. I can pinpoint the ingredients that go into the most finished dishes. That's obsession to me. And his personal secretary in the same interview says he still does this. Every new product the company makes, he tastes it. If something is missing, he names it. A 75-year-old billionaire with a lab full of chemists, he's still using his tongue because his grandfather taught him, let your senses guide you. And it's not stopped with the grandsons, it's how the fourth generation works as well. Pankaj Agrawal in 2015, who's fourth generation, great grandson of Haldiram, running a multi-billion-dollar business. The book opens with Pankaj walking into the spice room, a white-walled lab at the Gurgaon corporate office. He rolls up his sleeves, he mixes spices by hand, he tastes. The book gives you his father's advice word for word. Let your senses guide you, is what his father had said to him the first time, and his father before him. This reminds me exactly of Andrew Carnegie when every steel mill in America was buying pig iron from the same suppliers at the same price. Carnegie built his own blast furnace. When every mill used the same refining method, Carnegie hired a chemist, the first one in American steel, to test the iron before he bought it. Here's the exact Carnegie line which I love. What fools we had been. But then there was this consolation. We were not as great fools as our competitors. 9/10 of all the uncertainties of pig iron making were dispelled under the burning sun of chemical knowledge. Carnegie's competitors said they couldn't afford a chemist, while Carnegie's chemist was building the most efficient steel operation in the world. To add a little context, his company Carnegie Steel at its peak was making more steel than the entire European continent combined. Haldiram's competitors, in a similar way, said they couldn't afford to use Mot ki dal, while Haldiram's Mot Bhujia was building a brand that a century later still leads a market of over 300 competitors. The second idea is stay where the work is done. I love this idea. Michael Ferrero had a saying, I pledge myself to devote all of my activities and all of my efforts to this company. Michael Ferrero is the person whose company makes Tic Tacs, Nutella, and Ferrero Rocher, all these great confections. And his idea is something that I think would definitely come out of Haldiram's mouth. Haldiram never left the shop floor. At 12 years old, he was at the shop making bhujia. At 72, he was at the shop making bhujia. There's no phase in between where he becomes a manager, an owner, or a boss in a silk vest. The book documents this across 6 decades. Haldiram was a tall, agile, and fit man, even in his 70s. At the ripe old age of 72, he was riding his bicycle into town, checking on his storefronts and going about his daily chores. And here's the silk vest story. This is the one that tells you everything about Haldiram's relationship with his own wealth. His second son, Rameshwar Lal, who ran the Kolkata business, was doing well. He bought his father a double silk vest, a gift so his father could go back to Bikaner looking like a successful businessman. Haldiram refused and he gave the reason: our sweat and blood must always count for more than frivolities. I love it. This is the same man who walked knee deep through muddy water to avoid paying a rickshaw driver an extra 25 paise. This is the same man who asked his own cashier to account for 50 paise of travel expenses every single evening. The book says this explicitly. Being the owner, he owed the cashier no explanations. However, he expected the cashier to make an account of all expenses, regardless of the amount and who they were made by. That's some greatly detailed accounting, and it helps with cost control. And gentlemen, control your costs is the second most important maxim from the history of entrepreneurship. The first one is focus. Keep the main thing your main thing. The second one is, gentlemen, control your costs. Every single entrepreneur from the history of entrepreneurship was obsessed with cost control. And third is, have a long timeline. So, this idea that stay where the work happens is something that the grandsons learn as well. Shiv Kishan, who built the Nagpur empire in Nagpur at 75, still tastes every new product the company makes. He stays where the work is done. Patriarch, sons, grandsons, even great grandsons, none of them left the work. Despite Haldiram's being $10 billion company today, this is something that they do almost every day. Sam Walton did the same thing. He drove the same old pickup truck for decades, slept in budget hotels, shared rooms with executives on the road. You have to read this book called Sam Walton Made in America. It's the autobiography of Sam Walton, and it covers how he built Walmart in great detail. Every Saturday morning at 6 a.m., he was at the Bentonville headquarters running the same meeting for 40 years. Here's what Walton said: I have always had a strong bias against keeping any employee around who was chronically unhappy or disappointed. We are all here to work. The third idea is no outside money ever. And I want you to pay attention to this one because it's the one most modern founders would disagree with. And the one that explains why Haldiram still exists 100 years later, while most corporations have a half life of less than 20 years. Peter Thiel had this saying that the faster you build a company, the faster it could go down because the duration that you build your company represents the half life of it. The book says it plainly. He staunchly believed in not taking loans. He was a Marwadi, and Marwadis build their entire community on credit networks. But Haldiram would not borrow even from his own community. He would rather sell moong dal off a push cart for 6 months than take 100 rupees from a moneylender. 1944, he had just walked out of the family business with no money, no shop. 3 sons, a daughter-in-law and a grandson to support, and an old friend named Allah Beli finds him on the street in Bikaner, returns 100 rupees he had borrowed years earlier, and that 100 rupees is the entire starting capital for everything that becomes Haldiram's. He does not go to a bank. He does not go to a Marwadi Seth. He does not ask his brothers for share of the business they just pushed him out of. 100 rupees and 6 months of moong dal, that becomes the seed capital for 100-year empire. Now watch what happens next. Every single expansion in the family for the next 70 years is funded the same way. Internal cash flow only. Kolkata 1955. Haldiram travels for a friend Bhampuriya's son's wedding. His bhujia is a hit. His friend sits him down, says, bring the business here, people will love it. Haldiram agrees, but he funds it from Bikaner's profits. No partners, no outside backing. He ships a few workers from Bikaner. The family lives in a tiny apartment. They sell bhujia off a push cart in Kolkata streets until they can afford a 50 rupee a month shop on Kalakar Street. Nagpur, 1968. Same pattern. Shiv Kishan goes to help his sister Saraswati Devi and her husband set a shop. It's entirely funded by Kolkata and Bikaner's operations, with no bank involved. He starts making 100 rupees a day. In 3 years, that grows to 500 a day. 400% growth. Zero external capital. Same pattern in Delhi in 1983. Shiv Kishan and Manohar Lal pooled their savings to buy the space. Manohar Lal and his younger brother Madhusudan run it. These are all the grandsons of Haldiram. They buy an 8 by 11 foot shop, 88 square feet shop in Chandni Chowk. They build the workshop and living quarters above it themselves. October 1984. The shop is burnt. Manohar Lal has a wife and a 2-year-old son in a hotel. He does not borrow. Instead, family capital flows in from Bikaner and Nagpur, enough to buy a 300 square foot workshop. The brothers run double shifts to rebuild inventory. They built two more floors above the workshop, brick by brick from profits. Haldiram's, every branch of it across all four cities operated this way for the next 30 years. No institutional capital, no private equity, no IPO. Every rupee of expansion came from the shop. Michael Ferrero had a saying that growth should come from within or not at all. This is the idea which I believe builds companies which are built to last. For 106 years, that's what they did. A pushcart in Bikaner to a $10 billion company with zero outside money. Then in March of 2025, 45 years after Haldiram's death, his great grandsons merged the Delhi and Nagpur branches into one company. They've consolidated their FMCG businesses into one business and sold 10% to Temasek for $1 billion, the largest private equity consumer deal in Indian history. Haldiram was not in the room. The $10 billion valuation that Temasek paid for, every rupee of it was built without outside money. The fourth idea is the customer gives you the house. And this is a very important idea. It's the idea of customer obsession, keeping customer at the core. This is exactly what Jeff Bezos at Amazon repeated over and over again for 30 plus years. Haldiram said this out loud to his grandson Manohar Lal more than once. He considered customers to be equal to God. He would always say, God doesn't give me my house and money to support my family. My customers do. Whatever we sell to the customers, they must always feel that they have got their money's worth. That's why they come back. God does not give me my house, my customers do. Once you believe this, the whole operating system becomes a liturgy. It means service. Every action is a prayer to the source. This is exactly the idea that Hindu Dharma preaches. Sacrifice, dedicate your actions to the Creator, to the Lord, and your actions become equivalent of prayer. This is exactly what Henry Ford meant when he said that money comes naturally as a result of service. It's exactly what Sam Walton said in different words. There's only one boss, the customer, and he can fire anybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending his money somewhere else. The 7 a.m. lamp at Haldiram's shop is a service. You are not waiting for business, you are maintaining correct relation with the source. You cannot let a customer arrive at a closed shop. That would be refusing an offering. The cashier ritual is a service. Every 50 paise of travel money accounted for because every 50 paise came from the source. You cannot steal from the source. Even if you own the shop, you do not own the source. The source owns you. And the product itself is the primary offering. It has to be good. It has to be great because it goes back to the source. The bhujia is not just food. The bhujia is the thing you send back to the customer in exchange for the money that built your house. If it is not good, you have cheated the source. This company, this family keeps the customer first and then builds from there. Shiv Kishan in Nagpur in 1968. He does not enter a new city with his own product. He enters by studying what Nagpur's customers already love. Balushas, pedas, Mysore laddus. He makes Kaju Katli first because that's what Nagpur wants. He opens his restaurant with dosa and idli first, then samosas and kachoris because that's what Nagpur eats. John Rockefeller, of all people, believed in this idea. About the customer, he was unambiguous. He used to say, "We must ever remember we are refining oil for the poor man, and he must have it cheap and good." Rockefeller died in 1937. Haldiram was making bhujia in a dusty bazaar. Neither man knew other existed. And this is what's beautiful about studying the biographies of history's greatest entrepreneurs. It's a different story, but the same personality type over and over again. You read and you see that they lived across different generations, different geographies, and yet arrived at similar principles, similar truths. And those principles are what we're going to discuss at Billionaire Best Friend every single week. Actually, 2 times a week, over and over again. And the goal is to apply these principles to your own work and make it better. Learn from the grades directly. So, Haldiram Snack Foods, the merged Delhi Nagpur entity, does revenue of over 14,000 crores with an EBITDA of 20 to 21%. They have over 40% market share of India's organized snacks and savory market, over 40% share in ethnic namkeen segment, and Haldiram's products, they are exported to over 100 countries. Pal, a 12-year-old boy, started all of this. Then he used these principles to build his business and repeated them over and over again across 6 decades to his sons, then his grandsons. And now the great grandsons use these principles as well. It's a great family business. Michael Ferrero, who built Nutella into a $60 billion private company, said, "The reason a family business survives is this: to grow calmly, to have long term plans, to know how to wait, to not be caught up in the frenzy of the daily ups and downs." Forrest Mars Sr., who built the company which makes M&Ms, Snickers, Milky Way, wrote this into his family's rules in 1947. Because Mars is profitable and generates cash, we need not borrow money to the extent that we might lose control over our affairs. Michael Ferrero and Forrest Mars, they wrote it. Haldiram never wrote it but repeated them for 60 years. Loud enough so that 4 generations could learn how to work. That's where I'll close. The book is Bhujia Berens by Pavitra Kumar. Thanks for tuning in. See you next Monday.